America's known our share of tyrants. In response to tyranny, we created one of the greatest guiding documents ever written by mankind. We stood for what was right. We've also made mistakes, but we corrected those mistakes by fighting for what was right both inside our borders and beyond. Today, America faces another challenge: Christian nationalism. Misguided faith and misguided patriotism justifying misguided deeds.
Would turn the hearts of those who are in power and position to make decisions.
That's the line.
That's not who we are, America. The Constitution is as true today as the day it was ratified. America stands for freedom, and America stands for doing what's right. And it's time we start restoring the American dream. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Restoring the American Dream. It's Brian and Michel. I'm here with Michael Faulkner, and we've got a new guest, Bob Orr. I'm going to hand it over to Michael in 1 second. I just want to say that thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know if you're watching this from YouTube or from X or from Twitch or from Facebook or whichever social media platform you're watching it from, but we hope you're enjoying it. If you like it, please subscribe to it or give us a follow on X or whatever. This is going to be a great discussion, and this is part two of a very, very important aspect of our elections in our country that we need to battle down, and that is Citizens United. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael. Everybody, thank you for joining us again tonight. And Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian. And, Bob, I'll tell you, we want to hear a little bit about your background, but I am so excited. This is why I got into this with Brian, is to meet folk like you, to have guests like yourself on, because honestly, your background as a state Supreme Court justice is precisely what we need to hear. And so, Bob, if you don't mind, share with us just a little bit of your background, and then I want to ask you just a couple questions about states' rights versus federal rights, and then we can get into the subject a little bit more.
Sure, Michael. It's a great pleasure to be on your show and be with Brian tonight and talk about a subject that really is important. I'm an old lawyer. Sam Ervin, the old former senator from North Carolina, always described himself as just a country lawyer, but I grew up in Western North Carolina, up in the mountains. I've been licensed as an attorney here in North Carolina for over 50 years. We elect judges in North Carolina. I never really expected to serve in that capacity, but I ended up and ran 5 statewide judicial elections, partisan elections, and lost the first one, but fortunately got a second bite at the apple and won 2 races for the Court of Appeals, which is our intermediate appellate court. And then I won 2 races for the North Carolina Supreme Court and served on that court 10 years before retiring. So, I've been around the block in a lot of different ways. I spent 3 years in the Army early on, and I'm a UNC Tar Heel. And so happy to talk about sports anytime you want to.
Well,
although football's not the best.
I'm a Virginia Tech Hokie, so that will be an interesting conversation.
And Michael's was a professional NFL player, so for a period of time. So yeah, man, wow. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry. That got me.
So Brian, Bob. The thing that I find interesting, so that when you were describing that, it's just amazing for me. And for folks that don't know, every state does, elections differently as it relates to the court.
That's right.
Correct.
And so for North Carolina, it's a very interesting process for them to have elected judge and to go through an election process for the appellate court and then for the Supreme Court. That is amazing.
Yes, we elect all our judges,
the
trial court to the top, and it actually goes back to the 1868 Reconstruction Constitution, which provided for the election of judges. And with the exception of about 8 years in the early 2000s, all of the elections have been partisan elections.
Mm.
That one period they ran unaffiliated, but it was switched back to partisan.
Wow.
Terrible system, but that's what we got.
And, and so you know if for history geeks like myself, you look at that and you go, whoa, man, what does this mean? But it gets to the fundamental question of the Hawaii and their approach to basically ending corporate spending or limiting corporate spending or individual spending in elections. And Hawaii is coming out as a state. And so I wanted to ask you too, Brian. We were talking earlier, but the difference between state rights and federal rights. So to give us your take as a elected, North Carolinian, judge, give us your perspective on the whole, federal versus state rights issues as it relates to especially this issue.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really interesting area. States' rights, for better or worse, became and has been associated here in contemporary times with resistance against the federal government, segregation, things, the Civil War and the like. But we have to remember that 250 years ago, as we celebrate the Declaration of Independence, once we severed our ties with Great Britain, the 13 independent colonies were now independent states with no structure, no government. And so each of those original 13 states drafted a state constitution, 11 years before there was actually a United States Constitution. And so the mindset early on was that this is a republic. The independent states have granted power to the federal government ultimately through the United States Constitution. And of course, over the history of our country, more and more and more centralization of power has been residing in the federal government. And we now have a population, 330 million people. Invariably, a central government, a federal government, is going to be the repository of huge amounts of power. But I think the states, and I want to say there have been a number of cases where the current U.S. Supreme Court has said, well, this really isn't a federal question. This needs to go back to the states for them to answer it. The one caveat, though, is the United States Constitution trumps everything. So even though a state may pass a law or adopt a provision in the state constitution, it cannot give or violate the rights of its citizens if the federal constitution, protects or guarantees a specific right. So, in our Citizens United discussion, it's a federal constitutional First Amendment right, free speech and association. And so whatever the states may do, it just can't run afoul of the U.S. Constitution. And that's the hurdle that the Hawaiian state government is going to have to face ultimately is, does this attempt to put some limitations on corporate spending, and I'm assuming, I haven't seen the legislation, that it's independent expenditures, which is really what Citizens United was about. Can it fit in to the Supreme Court's interpretation and application of the First Amendment, freedom of speech, corporation?
Well, thank
Michael,
you for that, Brian.
I know we've talked about this. Because for those that didn't watch the first episode, should I play the video real quick? So,
Please. Yep.
so
Yep.
so
I was
just
gonna
so
ask you to do that.
folks that when we're talking about Hawaii, let me play a video real quickly so that you'll understand what they're doing and what they've done and why this is a wow moment. And that's why we're so lucky to have Bob on tonight. Let me go ahead and play that real quickly, and so you'll understand.
To whom does this democracy, whose 250th anniversary we are celebrating this year, to whom does this democracy actually belong? Same question raised earlier this month by the Hawaiian Republican State Representative Kanani Souza as she opened the floor debate on a bill that effectively bans corporate spending on elections in her state. If you haven't seen Souza's speech, you absolutely should look it up and watch it. Here's a clip.
Hawaii is not waiting for permission, not following the lead of others. We are leading. We are making history by restoring a fundamental truth. Power belongs to people, not corporations, especially political power. For too long, we have lived with a legal fiction that a corporation can stand shoulder to shoulder with a human being in the political arena, that it can spend without limit, influence without accountability, and project a voice so powerful that it overwhelms the very people our Constitution was written to protect. But here in Hawaii, we are not bound to accept that outcome as inevitable.
This is a very big deal. Hawaii just did something remarkable and genuinely historic. It passed a bill into law with near unanimous bipartisan support that effectively bans corporations from spending money to influence state elections. And it did this by redefining what powers a corporation actually has.
So I hope everybody watching this finds it as amazing as I do. I want to throw out two things real quick, Michael, and just kind of discussion points. Number one, as Restoring the American Dream, it passed by near unanimous support in the Hawaii. And she's a Republican, by the way. It passed by near unanimous support. And number two, what they did, which I hopefully Bob will be able to chat about this, but they redefined what a corporation is. I don't exactly understand the legal aspects of that, but there you go. So, folks, that's what we're talking about tonight. Go ahead, Michael. I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, and framing that, the reason that they were solving the problem that they're trying to solve is how much money is going into state elections and who is spending it and what are the limits and what controls does the state have in limiting who and how those contributions are made. In essence, it's the bedrock of election law in this country. And I think it's one of the most important issues that we're facing, because honestly, if elections can be bought by corporations or a big, power
Or
broker
individuals,
we are toast, because then we're going to be, foreign governments can influence elections and so forth and so on. I mean, they don't have to do it with technology; they can do it with money.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm on the soapbox, for this. And so Brian, Bob, that was my premise, and.
Yeah, and you should be on the soapbox. We were talking before we went on camera. I honestly think the way Citizens United has been applied is an even greater threat to democracy than gerrymandering, which is a whole nother topic. And they're close. But we have to make a very clear distinction here. We're not talking about campaign contributions to a specific candidate, which I think the laws are pretty clear. States and the federal government, can regulate how much we give to any particular candidate,
especially federal candidates. Yeah,
Citizens United dealt with independent expenditures, and what they said was a corporation, which there's a lot of precedent that they have constitutional rights, as even though they're not real people, they're treated as such, but they said that an independent expenditure is your right to go out and spend however much money you want to advocate for an issue or against an issue or for a candidate or against a candidate. You just can't coordinate it or run it through the campaigns. And like a lot of cases, sometimes what I'm suspecting the Supreme Court thought was going to open the door a little, threw it wide open, and all of a sudden we had huge corporations, billionaires, dark money PACs, all
Yep.
of the
Yep.
independent expenditures coming into the election process, so that the individual contributor, you and me, to a Senate campaign, a Supreme Court candidate, is really becoming inconsequential, if you have this outside money pouring into these races. And that's the great danger. Most campaigns are fairly low dollar. Whether it's a congressional campaign or legislative, or in our state for the Supreme Court, we have a very hotly contested Supreme Court race right now. If it were just supporters making contributions or PACs, that would be a fairly level playing field. But if you have outside money, if you have some billionaire that for whatever reason wants to dump, $5 million into the Supreme Court race in North Carolina, or into 3 legislative races in order to give one party the majority, then Citizens United open that door to them, as long as it's an independent expenditure. And the challenge, because it's, they make a somewhat compelling argument in Citizens United that, well, the First Amendment gives everybody the right to, say what you want and spend your money how you want to, within reason, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so therefore a corporation or a billionaire, has that right, because money equates to speech in the context of politics. That's how you get your message out. And so,
Yep.
the huge challenge is getting back to the Supreme Court ultimately with some sort of guardrails that both still adhere to traditional First Amendment free speech rights, but also recognizes the enormous destruction that's going on with the political system across the country because of this huge wash of dark money and outside special interest who who have entered the political fray. So when I say I think it's the greatest threat, that's why.
Wow. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, indeed it is. And when you say dark money, so for those of you who don't know, that's money that's given that it's contributed. It's not tax deductible, but it's contributed in such a way as I can't research it and find out who gave how much to the particular expenditure. And in terms of what they give it to is independent expenditure, and not coordinating it with the campaign is like, okay, that's great. It's not coordinated, but it's the same message. It's the same message to the same people. And it's on behalf of, they can't say on behalf of the XYZ campaign, but they can run negative ads. They can run smear campaigns. They can do all kinds of other things which influence voters. And that's at the end of the day, that's what they want, is to influence voters. Yes. So the part that disassociates with the American dream and that steers us awry is when elections are no longer, one person, one vote, or individuals deciding that we're going to come together and get behind a candidate. When elections like that, when fair election processes or normal election processes like that are upended, then we have a real problem in this nation. And it's something that we need to address. It's something.
Let me give you a good personal example. The most I ever raised and spent running statewide for the Supreme Court was maybe $250,000. We're getting ready to have a Supreme Court race here in 2026 where millions of dollars will be
Wow.
spent, and most of it will be from out of state, and most of it will be independent expenditures. The individual contributions that the two candidates are going to raise will pale in comparison to this outside money. And Michael, as you were saying, uh, nonprofit corporations are set up. People can contribute unlimited sums of money,
Yep.
and then the nonprofit spends it in its name, but the public has no way to go
Nope.
behind the curtain and see, did Vladimir Putin put 500 million into this entity? I don't know. I mean, and so, certainly one of the I think statutory changes that Congress and state governments could, I think, do is create laws requiring greater transparency and disclosure of who's funding these outside expenditures. Doesn't necessarily limit what's doing it, but if you've got an entity that is going to hurt somebody's campaign, you may not want their name coming out that they're supporting you, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's one of the avenues getting back to restoring the American dream,
Yeah.
but it's
So,
really damaging politics.
Bob, let me ask you this directly. What do you think of the approach that the legislator has taken in Hawaii against Citizen United? Essentially
Mm.
saying the state has the right to define, they have the power to define what a corporation is. How do you find that language, that legal argument?
Well, I haven't looked at the specific statute, so I'm always a little reluctant to give an opinion. I think, I mean, you could do away with corporations. I mean, they are a fiction of the law.
Right.
So, but that doesn't necessarily address independent expenditures. I mean,
Okay.
you're not going to do away with nonprofit corporations. I mean, that's a vehicle for a lot of good, right? So and corporations are a business model for your state, your communities. So you can't really, as a practical matter, say we're going to do away with corporations.
All right.
So, but I admire them for recognizing the problem and at least attempting to come up with a legislative solution. And it may work. Like I said, I haven't seen the specifics of it, but again, it's about how do you limit independent expenditures in the political arena, no matter where the money comes from. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think a chart, Brian, that you sent me, was looking at the billionaires pouring money
I'm
into.
putting that up right now as you're talking. Yep. Go
Right.
ahead and please
Yeah.
keep talking.
So,
But yeah, go ahead.
so you can do away with corporations, and that doesn't prohibit those billionaires, Elon Musk or George Soros or whatever, from doing independent expenditures. It's just sort of what vehicle they use to spend that
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. So I actually run a 501c3 and a 501c4. The C4 is not active. I'm not gonna. I don't want to go into another dive in this. If you want to know more about it, folks, watch the last show. But the C4s are probably the biggest way to run dark money. I'll just tell you, it really is
Yeah.
because of the limitations. My question for you, if you don't mind, I just want to ask a real quick question, Michael. I'm going to give it back to you because this is like super fascinating to me. And this is going to be a really dumb question, Bob, but I'm going to hit you with it anyways. How do you define a corporation as a person?
Well, it's a fiction of the law, but it is a business model that has a long history of being used in commerce. And so, it can operate a business just like you can operate a business as an individual, or you and Michael as partners. So I think over the years, in various cases, the question was, well, all right, what rights does the corporation have, which is owned by shareholders,
By
right?
people, right?
So,
Yeah.
it's not like it's an AI entity with no real people associated
Right.
with it.
Not yet.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're getting there, I guess. So I just think it's, historically in the law, as cases have come up over the years, this business model has been recognized as having rights. And what Citizens United said was, all right, if you're, XYZ corporation and you feel very strongly about tariffs, okay, you've got a right to spend your money in an independent expenditure
Okay.
advocating for
Okay.
tariffs or against tariffs.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry. I had to
Yeah,
ask that. Yeah.
no, it's important because at the end of the day, we're the election influence. The reason money is being spent is because you want to influence voters.
Right.
Because still at the ballot box, no matter how much is going into an independent expenditure, you still have people going to individuals going into a ballot box or mail-in ballot or whatever, and that person gets a vote. And that's why, what Bob was saying about gerrymandering is it's so tricky because that it injects politics into the equation and skews the amount of people in one district, in one direction or another, and it's purely political.
It's cheating.
And it
It's
is cheating.
cheating.
It is
Well,
cheating. Now,
all right. Now,
at one point,
wait a minute. You hit my hot button here now.
okay,
All
Yeah,
right.
'cause I just spent 2 years litigating a case and losing it, trying to argue that it wasn't about drawing lines on a map. It's about individual elections for individual districts and the manipulation of voter pools, which is what you're talking about. In essence, rigs the outcome of the election
Yeah.
by
right.
moving the right voters in the right proportion. You're going, and it's not. I want to emphasize it's not the political party, it's the government doing it. They're the ones drawing the districts.
Yeah.
And so you have government rigging the elections, which is so fundamentally adverse to what the framers of our Constitution and the founders of our nation believed in, and that it is staggering to me that this is where we are. But that's for another
And
topic.
now,
Yeah.
in defense, it started, as a way to get more black voters to empower them in districts or in situations where their vote has historically not been counted or not been counted fairly or where they were biased. And so there were a myriad of reasons that we got into the Voter Protection Act and so forth.
Right.
But
DRA. Yeah.
the cure has become worse than the disease.
Yeah.
Well,
what we,
I would say, a slight disagreement with you, Michael. The use of race in creating districts under the Voting Rights Act, the Republican Party figured out, hey, if we pack enough black voters into a district, they can elect a black congressperson, but we're going to elect a bunch of our guys over here.
Yeah, they get one, we get nine.
Polluted. Yeah, and frankly, we've been gerrymandering in this country since Patrick Henry in the very first creation of districts tried to shaft James Madison out of a congressional seat. Okay? So, but where we are now technologically, you can create a district using computers and various political algorithms that. I mean, I had a political consultant tell me that he had 2,000 data points on every voter in the state. Now you think about that. He knew more about each of us than our spouses did, right? I mean, and so you use that data in computer technology, and all of a sudden you've got a district that your political party, no matter whether it's one controlled by Republicans or one controlled by Democrats, you can't beat me,
That's right.
and like I say, you don't have to steal all the votes. You only have to steal the margin of
Definitely.
victory, right? So it is rigging elections. We got to get the American public to recognize that.
I know we have to close up, but I just want to say too a couple of things. Number one, you can buy that information. We did. We
Yeah.
did. As Alliance Party, you can buy all that information. It's for sale. So does that mean that our elections are for sale? I don't know.
Yes.
There's a deep thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
listen, it's really tough. Look, I ran as a Republican, a conservative Republican in New York City. Okay, so the talk about the deck being stacked against me. However, in specific areas where I was trying to make some headway in specific districts, we could have, we had those data points, and we needed those data points, and that information became power. And I was blocked out of receiving any of that information and any of that help. But
Oh boy, now you're crossing over into one of my hot buttons, which we're not going to be able to get to tonight. But now you're hitting one of my hot buttons because we got blackballed too. So
Yeah.
yes, and it happens. We have to shut this down. We're already over time. We got to have Bob back on. Michael, oh
Yes,
my
we do.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
absolutely.
And we have to do one on gerrymandering. And oh my Lord, you better buckle down the hatches because it's gonna get loud and heated with this. Folks, everybody, I'm sorry this ran a little bit over, but my gosh, we could sit here and talk about this for another hour or two. If you're watching this again, I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or X or Twitch or where you're watching it from, but if you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. You'll get this. You'll get Thursday Thoughts. You'll get the Political Arena, which is all politics. You'll get the Hinge of History, which is absolutely no politics and all about AI. And let me just warn you that the reality of AI is coming to us, America, whether you want it to or not. Our show tonight was fabulous, wonderful. Michael, like I said, we've got to get him back on. Bob, you were incredible. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It was, man, it's like reading an encyclopedia that quickly, just so much information. It was a lot of fun. So thanks, Michael. Thanks, Bob. Oh my gosh, what a great meeting. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
You've been watching Reverend Michael's Restoring the American Dream. The Noble Media Group is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow so you can watch this show and many others.
A Noble Media Group member.